The needle slips into the IV port without resistance. 73 seconds. That's how long potassium chloride takes to stop a human heart when administered in concentrated doses directly into the bloodstream. The hand guiding the syringe belongs to a woman wearing pale blue scrubs. Her hospital ID badge reads, Noor Haddad, RN, Cardiac Care Unit. She works the night shift at Al Amin Public Hospital in southern Beirut, where staff shortages mean fewer witnesses and exhausted colleagues who ask no questions. For 11 months, she has checked vitals, changed dressings, and calmed frightened patients. Tonight, she will commit murder. The target lies sedated 3 beds down, admitted 48 hours ago with abdominal injuries from a car accident. His real name doesn't match the passport found in his wallet. Mossad knows him as Faisal Darwish, logistics coordinator for Hezbollah's weapons procurement network in Eastern Europe. They've been hunting him for 5 years. Now he's immobilized, vulnerable, and alone. No bodyguards, no escape routes. Just a woman whose training extends far beyond nursing school, a syringe filled with something that will mimic cardiac arrest, and one question. Will the attending physician arrive early for rounds, or will she have time to finish what she came here to do? If this kind of precision interests you, subscribe now. You're about to see how intelligence services turn hospitals into hunting grounds. Now, rewind. Understanding how Faisal Darwish ended up dying in a Beirut hospital requires understanding who he was and why Israeli intelligence deemed his elimination worth the risk. Born in 1978 in Tyre, southern Lebanon, Faisal grew up where Hezbollah flags hung from balconies and portraits of martyrs covered crumbling walls. His father worked as a mechanic. His mother died during the Israeli occupation when an artillery shell struck their apartment building. He was 7 years old. Rage became purpose. Grief became methodology. By his teens, Faisal had joined Hezbollah's youth networks, running errands for local commanders and proving himself reliable through silence and discipline. He excelled at mathematics and logistics, talents senior operatives recognized as more valuable than frontline combat. Hezbollah needed fighters, but it also needed engineers of infrastructure. People who could move weapons across borders, coordinate safe houses, and maintain supply chains. Faisal became one of those engineers. His mind worked in systems rather than emotions. He viewed resistance as a logistics problem, requiring solutions calibrated to resources and timing. In 2003, he relocated to Prague undercover as a textile importer, establishing a front company processing legitimate cargo while embedding weapons shipments within falsified manifests. Czech customs officials saw invoices matching container contents. European intelligence detected nothing unusual. Behind this facade, Faisal coordinated a network stretching from Bulgaria to Belgium, moving Russian-made anti-tank missiles, Iranian guidance systems, and explosives through routes exploiting gaps in border security. He operated with meticulous discipline, never meeting contacts more than once, never using electronic communication that could be traced, never allowing personal relationships to compromise operational security. Israeli intelligence first identified him in 2007, when intercepted communications mentioned a coordinator using the codename Abu Rami. Analysts spent 18 months connecting fragments before confirming his identity. By 2009, Mossad had compiled a comprehensive profile documenting his movements, associates, and methodology. They tracked him through Athens, Vienna, and Istanbul, watching from surveillance posts as he conducted meetings in crowded cafes where ambient noise defeated recording devices. He was careful, never predictable, always moving. The decision to eliminate Faisal came after intelligence linked him to a shipment of advanced anti-aircraft systems reaching Hezbollah fighters in southern Lebanon. Those weapons shot down an Israeli drone conducting reconnaissance near the border. 3 months later, they damaged a helicopter evacuating wounded soldiers. The calculus shifted. Faisal wasn't just facilitating resistance, he was directly enabling attacks, killing Israeli personnel. Authorization for his elimination moved through classified channels, stamped with bureaucratic language, transforming murder into operational necessity. Target designation confirmed. Neutralization approved. Killing Faisal presented unique challenges. He lived under deep cover in European cities where Mossad operations attracted immediate diplomatic blowback. He varied his routines, stayed in anonymous hotels, and avoided locations where operatives could stage accidents or ambushes. Traditional methods wouldn't work. A shooting would expose Israeli involvement. Poison in a restaurant risked collateral casualties. A car bomb violated operational doctrine against spectacular violence in European capitals. They needed something invisible, a method eliminating Faisal while appearing completely natural, leaving no evidence connecting his death to foreign intelligence. The opportunity emerged through signals intelligence in late 2011. Intercepted phone metadata revealed Faisal had traveled from Prague to Beirut, an unusual deviation from his European patterns. Further surveillance confirmed he was visiting family in Tyre, staying with relatives for the first time in years. Mossad analysts recognized the vulnerability immediately. In Europe, Faisal operated under constant vigilance. In Lebanon, surrounded by Hezbollah's security apparatus, he might relax his guard. And if something happened to him on home territory, Israeli involvement would seem less likely than local rivalries or accidents. The operation received final authorization in November 2011 under the cryptonym Operation Whitecoat. Planners from Mossad's Caesarea unit designed a mission unlike anything they had executed before. Instead of deploying a hit team for rapid assassination, they would infiltrate a single operative into Beirut's medical infrastructure and wait. The operative would establish cover as a legitimate healthcare worker, embed herself in a hospital's daily routine, and remain dormant until Faisal's pattern intersected with that environment. It might take months, it might never happen, but patience was a weapon sharpened through decades of tradecraft. The operative selected for this mission had spent 6 years preparing for precisely this kind of assignment. Born in Haifa to Iraqi Jewish parents who fled Baghdad in the 1950s, she grew up speaking Arabic with native fluency and Hebrew with the precision of formal education. Her family name carried no obvious Israeli markers. Her appearance blended seamlessly into Middle Eastern crowds. She had trained as a nurse before Mossad recruitment, completing her medical certification at Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem, while simultaneously undergoing intelligence assessment. Her psychological profile revealed traits essential for deep cover work: comfort with isolation, ability to maintain false identity under sustained pressure, and capacity for moral compartmentalization, allowing execution of lethal missions without debilitating guilt. In January 2012, she entered Lebanon through the Syrian border using forged documents identifying her as Noor Haddad, Lebanese national returning from nursing work in Dubai. Her legend had been constructed with obsessive detail. Bank records showing regular salary deposits, social media profiles documenting years of posts about shifts, colleagues, and daily frustrations of medical work. Even a fabricated romantic relationship ended 6 months earlier, complete with photos and messages archived on devices that would survive forensic examination. Every element designed to withstand investigation if anyone questioned her background. Al Amin Public Hospital hired her within 3 weeks. The facility served working-class neighborhoods in southern Beirut, an area dense with Hezbollah supporters, where the organization maintained informal oversight of security and social services. Staff shortages meant hospitals accepted qualified nurses without excessive scrutiny. Noor presented credentials, completed a brief interview, and started night shifts in the cardiac care unit. Her supervisor described her as competent and quiet, someone who did her job without complaint and avoided workplace politics. Perfect invisibility achieved through professional mediocrity. For 9 months, she worked genuinely as a nurse. She administered medications, monitored patients, and filed paperwork with the routine exhaustion of someone trapped in underpaid labor. Her apartment near the hospital contained nothing suggesting intelligence work. No hidden communications equipment, no weapons. Only the ordinary debris of a single woman's life. Laundry waiting to be washed, half-read books on her nightstand, expired vegetables in her refrigerator. She attended mosque occasionally, enough to avoid suspicion, but not so frequently that religious leaders might scrutinize her faith. She made no friends, but maintained cordial relationships with colleagues. Everything about her existence whispered ordinary. Encrypted communication with Tel Aviv occurred once weekly through a system requiring no devices or meetings. She visited a specific internet cafe, logged into a webmail account using credentials memorized during training, and checked for messages embedded in spam emails advertising pharmaceuticals. Instructions appeared as strings of numbers indicating medication dosages, dates, times, confirmation codes. She never responded, never lingered, never returned on predictable schedules. The system's beauty lay in its simplicity. Even if Lebanese intelligence monitored the cafe, they would see only a woman deleting junk mail during her afternoon off. The first 3 months tested her discipline more severely than any training scenario. She worked genuine 12-hour night shifts, arriving at 2,200 hours and leaving at 1,000, 5 nights per week. The physical exhaustion was real, the patients were real, the medications she administered and the vitals she monitored were real. She learned colleague names, memorized medication protocols, adapted to the unit's informal procedures reflecting resource scarcity and institutional dysfunction. She made no mistakes attracting supervisory attention. She volunteered for no extra duties, increasing her visibility. Perfect professional mediocrity maintained. Communication messages for the first months contained only confirmations to maintain position. No intelligence about Faisal's location or movements. No updates about operational timeline. Just wait, remain embedded, continue your cover. Her apartment reinforced the isolation. The studio flat in a working-class neighborhood contained nothing revealing her true identity, but also nothing suggesting a life beyond bare survival. No photographs of family because her family existed only in fabricated documents. No mementos from Dubai because she had never lived there. No books beyond a few Arabic novels purchased from street vendors. She existed in permanent suspension, waiting for a mission that might never activate. She maintained connection to her true purpose through a private ritual performed each Friday afternoon. She would sit on her apartment floor, close her eyes, and visualize the briefing room in Tel Aviv where she had received her assignment. She remembered her case officer's face. She remembered the photographs of Faisal Darwish and the intelligence reports documenting his role in weapons networks. She remembered why this mission mattered, not for abstract geopolitical reasons, but for the specific Israeli soldiers who had died because of weapons Faisal moved across borders. She reconstructed her true identity through these memories, reminding herself that Noor was a tool she wielded rather than a person she had become. Then, in October 2012, everything changed. A routine spam email contained a sequence she had been trained to recognize. Target proximity confirmed. Maintain readiness. Await secondary confirmation. Her pulse didn't accelerate. Her hands didn't shake. Years of training had conditioned her nervous system to suppress panic responses. She deleted the email, logged out, and walked back to her apartment maintaining the same pace and expression as always. Inside, she sat on her bed and allowed herself 30 seconds of controlled breathing before returning to the mask she wore. The secondary confirmation arrived 72 hours later. Faisal Darwish had been injured in a staged car accident on the coastal highway between Tyre and Beirut. Mossad operatives had orchestrated the collision using a truck that sideswiped his vehicle before disappearing into traffic. The impact was calculated to cause abdominal trauma serious enough to require hospitalization, but not life-threatening enough to attract intensive security scrutiny. Faisal was transported to Al Amin Public Hospital, the closest facility to the accident site. Admitted under his cover name, Karim Mansour, expected to remain under observation for 48 to 72 hours. Noor received the final authorization through her next spam email. Execute at earliest viable opportunity. Ensure method appears natural. Extract immediately after confirmation. The window was narrow. Faisal's injuries would heal. Hezbollah associates would eventually arrive to secure his protection. If she waited too long, the opportunity would evaporate. But if she acted too quickly, while doctors and staff remained hypervigilant about his condition, the risk of exposure multiplied. She needed the precise moment when medical attention relaxed, but before security tightened. That moment would arrive during the third night of his admission, when exhaustion dulled everyone's attention and protocol gave way to shortcuts sustaining underfunded healthcare systems. The method had been planned months earlier during operational training. Potassium chloride administered intravenously in concentrated doses causes cardiac arrest that forensic pathologists struggle to distinguish from natural causes. The human body contains potassium naturally. Elevated levels can result from kidney failure, dehydration, or medication interactions. Unless an autopsy specifically tests for suspicious concentrations at the injection site and correlates timing with witness statements, the death appears as tragic medical complication rather than murder. The syringe and concentrated solution came from the hospital's own pharmacy. No foreign materials. No smuggled weapons. Just medical supplies diverted during a shift when inventory oversight was minimal. The beauty of the method lay in its medical legitimacy. Potassium chloride was used daily in the cardiac unit for legitimate therapeutic purposes. A nurse accessing it raised no alarms. The concentrated dose Noor would administer, 50 milliequivalents delivered as a rapid bolus, would stop Faisal's heart within 73 seconds. But post-mortem, his potassium levels would normalize as the compound dispersed through his tissue. What remained would look like elevation from trauma-induced renal stress, not assassination. Her instructors in Tel Aviv had drilled the procedure until it became muscle memory. Locate the IV port. Swab with alcohol to maintain sterile procedure even in murder. Insert the needle at a 30-degree angle. Depress the plunger with steady, controlled pressure, not too fast to cause visible distress, not too slow to extend the window of vulnerability. 73 seconds from injection to cardiac arrest. Then withdraw, dispose of the syringe in her pocket rather than the sharps container, and resume normal nursing duties. The training had included one detail her instructors emphasized repeatedly. Faisal would wake. The potassium entering his bloodstream would cause immediate sensations, burning along his veins, sudden chest pressure, difficulty breathing. He would open his eyes. He might try to speak. He might even try to grab her arm. "You cannot hesitate," her case officer had said during their final briefing. "He will look at you. He will be confused. He will be afraid. You will feel the impulse to explain, to comfort, to apologize. Resist it. You are a nurse checking his IV, nothing more. Smooth his blanket, adjust his pillow. Let him die thinking it's a medical emergency, not murder." On the third night of Faisal's hospitalization, Noor arrived for her shift at 2200 hours. The cardiac unit held 8 patients. Faisal occupied bed 6, separated from the nurses' station by 2 other beds and a partial privacy curtain. He slept under mild sedation, his abdomen bandaged, vitals stable. She had observed him carefully over the previous 48 hours without ever speaking directly to him. His chart indicated steady improvement, blood pressure normalized, pain managed with standard analgesics. Doctors expected discharge within 24 hours. The window was closing. No visitors remained. Hospital policy prohibited overnight guests except for critical cases. A single security guard sat near the unit entrance, focused on his phone rather than patient rooms. She had studied his pattern over 9 months of night shifts. He took bathroom breaks at predictable intervals. He scrolled through social media with the glazed attention of someone enduring boring duty. He had never once walked through the unit to check on patients. The attending physician had completed evening rounds at 21:30. Dr. Khalil, a cardiologist in his 50s who carried the permanent exhaustion of someone working in an underfunded public hospital. He wouldn't return until morning unless an emergency summoned him. Noor had worked with him long enough to know his patterns. He trusted his nursing staff. He didn't micromanage overnight care. He responded to pages but rarely initiated check-ins. The other nurse on duty tonight was Rania, a woman in her 30s who Noor had shared countless shifts with over the past months. Rania considered her a friend, or as close to a friend as two exhausted night shift nurses could become. They had shared cigarette breaks on the hospital's rear loading dock, complained about administrators, and commiserated over impossible patient loads. Rania had no idea that every conversation, every shared confidence, every moment of apparent connection had been performance. Strategic invisibility achieved through calculated mediocrity and controlled intimacy. Tonight, Rania was managing a difficult patient in bed 2, an elderly man with congestive heart failure who grew agitated during evening hours. She would be occupied for at least 30 minutes, possibly longer. Perfect timing. Noor worked through her routine tasks with mechanical precision. She checked vitals on other patients, administered scheduled medications, and documented everything in charts that would later be scrutinized for irregularities. At 23:45, she checked on the elderly patient with Rania, helping to reposition him and adjust his oxygen. She made conversation, asked about Rania's daughter's school performance, maintained the mask of normalcy. At 0:15, she told Rania she was going to the medication room to prepare morning doses early, a practice both nurses used to lighten the workload during the chaotic final hours of night shift. Rania nodded without looking up from her charting. The medication room was a narrow space lined with locked cabinets and a small counter. Noor closed the door behind her. Her hands remained steady as she unlocked the cabinet containing concentrated electrolytes. She had diverted the potassium chloride 3 days earlier during an evening shift when the pharmacy technician was distracted by a delivery. She had hidden it behind a box of saline flushes, knowing no one would find it before she needed it. She drew the solution into a standard 10 milliliter syringe and capped it carefully. Placed it in her right pocket along with alcohol swabs and a flush syringe, items any nurse might carry during rounds. In her left pocket, she placed an empty syringe that she would use later to create the appearance of giving a legitimate medication, should anyone ask what she had been doing at bed 6. Her movements remained calm, unhurried. Just another exhausted healthcare worker navigating another overnight shift. She checked her reflection in the small mirror above the sink. Her face showed nothing. No fear, no anticipation, no moral conflict, just tired professionalism. She opened the door and stepped back into the unit. Approaching Faisal's bed required crossing 20 meters of open unit floor. Each step carried exponential risk. A colleague could call her name. An alarm could sound from another patient. The security guard could glance up and wonder why she was moving toward a patient whose vitals showed stable. A family member of another patient could emerge from a room and see her administering an injection without documentation. But operational training emphasized a counterintuitive truth. Hesitation attracts more attention than confidence. People notice uncertainty. They ignore routine. She walked with the tired purpose of someone performing her 10th task of the hour, carrying supplies, checking a chart, doing her job. The unit's ambient sounds surrounded her, the rhythmic beeping of cardiac monitors, the hiss of oxygen flowing through nasal cannulas, the distant conversation between Rania and the elderly patient, the muted voices from a television in one of the private rooms. Normal hospital sounds that would continue normally after Faisal's heart stopped. She reached his bedside, drew the privacy curtain slightly, a routine gesture nurses made dozens of times per shift to give patients dignity during care. The movement blocked the nurse's station sightline, not obviously, not suspiciously, but enough. Faisal stirred slightly, but didn't wake. His fourth line ran from his left forearm to a saline bag hanging beside the bed. She checked the port with practiced movements, exactly as she would during legitimate medication administration. Her hands remained steady. Her breathing stayed controlled. 7 years of training condensed into the next 73 seconds. She uncapped the syringe, inserted the needle into the IV port, and depressed the plunger with steady pressure. The concentrated potassium chloride entered his bloodstream. His eyes opened, not fully alert, but aware. Confusion rather than alarm. The sedation made everything slow, dreamlike, He looked at her face. His lips moved, trying to form words. Managed only a weak sound that could have been nurse or what, or simply a groan. His heart began the rhythm disruption that would kill him. Ventricular fibrillation initiated by the sudden electrolyte imbalance. His body registered what his mind couldn't process. Something was catastrophically wrong. Noor withdrew the syringe, capped it, and placed it back in her pocket. She checked his pulse, feeling the irregular beat beneath her fingers. 45 seconds. His breathing became labored. His hand lifted slightly from the bed, reaching for nothing. She smoothed his blanket with her left hand, adjusted his pillow with her right. The gestures of a nurse providing comfort during distress. 60 seconds. His body tensed, back arching slightly as his nervous system fired chaotic signals. Then relaxed. The muscles slackened. His eyes remained open but unfocused. 73 seconds. His heart stopped. She pressed the call button mounted on the wall behind his bed, stepped to the curtain's opening, and called to the nurse's station with controlled urgency. "Rania, I need you. Patient in distress, bed 6, possible cardiac event." The response came with immediate urgency. Rania rushed over, her tired expression transforming into focused alarm. She checked Faisal's pulse, found nothing, and shouted toward the unit entrance. "Code Blue, we need the crash cart." The security guard finally looked up from his phone. Other staff emerged from rooms and offices. The cardiac unit transformed from quiet night routine into controlled chaos. Noor stepped back, allowing senior staff to take control. Someone paged Dr. Khalil. Someone else brought the defibrillator. They initiated CPR. Rania performed chest compressions with the mechanical rhythm drilled into every nurse. Another nurse bagged oxygen into his lungs. Dr. Khalil arrived within 5 minutes, still pulling on his white coat as he took command of the resuscitation. "What happened?" he asked, checking the monitor. Noor delivered her report with clinical precision. "I was making rounds. He appeared to be sleeping normally. When I checked his position, he opened his eyes briefly, then showed signs of respiratory distress. Pulse became irregular. I called for assistance immediately. By the time Rania arrived, he was in full arrest." Dr. Khalil nodded, already focused on the resuscitation protocol. They shocked him twice, administered epinephrine, continued compressions. The monitor showed flatline, occasionally interrupted by chaotic spikes that weren't actual heartbeats, but electrical noise from the defibrillator. Noor remained nearby, answering questions about his status before the event. Vitals were stable when I checked at 23:30. Blood pressure 118/76. Heart rate 72. Oxygen saturation 96%. No complaints of pain or discomfort. He was resting comfortably. It happens sometimes. Patients with abdominal trauma, stress on the system, underlying conditions nobody detected. Young men could have undiagnosed congenital heart defects. The accident could have triggered clotting that traveled to his heart. Cardiac events were tragic but not suspicious, especially in a unit where they occurred weekly. After 20 minutes, Dr. Khalil called the time of death. 0047. The team stepped back, exhausted and frustrated. Another life lost despite their efforts. Dr. Khalil looked at Noor and Rania. "You both did everything correctly. Sometimes we can't save them." Rania wiped her eyes. She always took deaths personally, even after years in cardiac care. Noor placed a hand on her shoulder in what appeared to be sympathetic comfort. The team dispersed to document the code, notify family, and arrange for the body's transfer. Noor returned to her other patients, completing her shift with the same mechanical efficiency. Inside, adrenaline screamed through her nervous system, but her face showed only tired professionalism. She documented the event in clinical language. Patient found in acute distress at 0040 hours. Code Blue initiated. Resuscitation efforts continued for 20 minutes without success. Time of death called by Dr. Khalil at 0047 hours. She signed her notes and left at 0600 when her replacement arrived. The extraction had been planned as meticulously as the assassination. A taxi waited 3 blocks from the hospital, positioned near a 24-hour pharmacy. The driver, a Mossad asset operating under separate cover, took her to a safe house in East Beirut. By 0800, she had discarded her nurse's uniform, changed into civilian clothes, and assumed a new identity. Her hair, previously pulled back in a professional bun, now hung loose. Contact lenses changed her eye color. A different style of dress transformed her appearance from medical professional to young woman traveling for work. By noon, she crossed into Syria using forged documents identifying her as Yasmin Haddad, Syrian national returning from medical work in Lebanon. The border guards barely glanced at her passport. 48 hours later, she landed in Tel Aviv. Mission accomplished. Target neutralized. No exposure. The autopsy at Al Amin Hospital concluded that Karim Mansour died of cardiac arrest, likely triggered by complications from his vehicular injuries. The pathologist, overworked and underpaid, noted elevated potassium levels, but attributed them to kidney stress from trauma and the body's post-mortem changes. No further investigation was recommended. His body was released to family members who buried him entire according to Islamic tradition. Hezbollah officials attended the funeral, unaware that the man they mourned had been assassinated by an intelligence service operating inside their territory for nearly a year. Israeli authorities never confirmed involvement. When questioned by international journalists about rumors connecting Mossad to the death, official spokespeople offered standard denials. "We do not comment on intelligence matters." The operation remained classified, its details known only to the handful of planners, analysts, and operatives directly involved. For them, Operation Whitecoat represented perfection in intelligence tradecraft. A target eliminated without witnesses, without evidence, without international scandal. Just silence and a body buried beneath earth holding no answers. The decision to deploy a deep-cover operative inside a Lebanese hospital didn't emerge from strategic brilliance, but from operational desperation. By 2011, Mossad had exhausted conventional approaches to eliminating Faisal Darwish. Surveillance teams tracked him across 6 European cities without finding opportunities for clean elimination. Assassination planners proposed 12 different scenarios, each rejected for excessive risk or diplomatic exposure. A shooting in Prague would trigger Czech intelligence investigations and strain bilateral relations Israel couldn't afford to damage. Poisoning in a Vienna restaurant risked collateral casualties and witnesses who might describe suspicious individuals near the target. A staged accident required controlling too many variables in urban environments, where cameras and cell phones turned every street into documented space. The problem wasn't capability, but context. Mossad possessed the technical means to kill Faisal anywhere. What they lacked was the operational environment where his death could occur invisibly. European capitals offered no such spaces. Every death attracted investigation. Every unexplained fatality generated paperwork connecting dots intelligence services preferred to keep separated. The solution required thinking beyond geography toward vulnerability. Where would Faisal lower his guard? Where could an operative establish presence without triggering security alerts? Where did institutional chaos create cover for lethal action? Hospitals answered all 3 questions. Medical facilities operated in perpetual crisis, understaffed and overwhelmed, where exhausted personnel focused on immediate emergencies rather than background checks for new hires. Patients arrived vulnerable, their bodies compromised, their defenses reduced to levels where small interventions produced catastrophic results. And deaths in hospitals carried automatic explanations. Complications, underlying conditions. Tragic, but statistically inevitable outcomes that rarely prompted suspicion beyond standard administrative review. If Faisal could be maneuvered into a hospital, and if an operative could be embedded within that hospital's staff, the elimination became almost trivial from a technical perspective. But embedding an operative into Lebanese medical infrastructure required patience measured in years rather than months. The mission couldn't rely on waiting for Faisal to naturally require hospitalization. Instead, planners designed a two-phase approach. First, insert the operative and allow her to establish deep cover over extended duration. Second, engineer circumstances forcing Faisal into the specific medical facility where that operative worked. The staged car accident that delivered Faisal to Al Amin Hospital was itself a masterpiece of operational planning. Mossad couldn't simply kidnap him off a Beirut street. That would trigger immediate Hezbollah investigation and security lockdown, making any subsequent action impossible. Instead, they needed an incident appearing completely accidental while producing injuries serious enough to require hospitalization, but not so severe that he would be transferred to a specialized facility with tighter security. The vehicle that sideswiped Faisal's car on the coastal highway was driven by a Lebanese asset, a man with gambling debts who accepted payment to cause the collision and then disappear into the city's informal economy where Hezbollah's reach diminished among purely criminal networks. The impact was calibrated through multiple factors. The asset's vehicle was a heavy truck whose mass ensured significant damage to Faisal's smaller sedan. The location was chosen for a specific curve where the collision would appear as plausible result of a truck driver taking the turn too wide. The timing occurred during late afternoon, when traffic density provided witnesses who would corroborate the accident's appearance, while preventing anyone from pursuing the truck driver who fled the scene. Faisal's injuries, abdominal trauma from the seatbelt and steering wheel impact, required exactly the kind of observation and treatment Al Amin Hospital provided. Not emergency surgery that would send him to a university hospital. Not minor injuries allowing same-day discharge, but significant enough that he would remain hospitalized for at least 48 hours. When the ambulance delivered him to Al Amin's emergency department, the plan's final phase had begun. Everything now depended on Noor's ability to identify the window and execute without hesitation. 3 weeks after Faisal's death, Noor sat in a debriefing room beneath Mossad headquarters in Tel Aviv. Her case officer reviewed the operation's timeline, asking detailed questions about each decision point. Had she felt compromised at any moment? Had any colleague expressed suspicion about her background? Had hospital administrators questioned any aspect of her performance? Her answers were negative across all inquiries. Her case officer confirmed that Operation Whitecoat would be studied for years as a model of deep cover infiltration and execution. But Noor had been back in Israel for 3 weeks, and she still thought in Arabic more naturally than Hebrew. She still woke expecting to see her apartment in Beirut. She still reached for the hospital ID badge that no longer hung around her neck. The psychological transition was taking longer than anticipated. She had lived as Noor Haddad for 9 months, and the disorientation persisted. When she closed her eyes, she saw Faisal's face. He had looked at her. He was confused. He was afraid. And she had smoothed his blanket while his heart stopped. She understood the operational logic. She had eliminated a target responsible for weapon systems killing Israeli soldiers. She had been selected precisely because psychological assessments indicated her capacity for moral compartmentalization. But understanding didn't erase the memory of Faisal's eyes opening, his lips trying to form words, his hand reaching for nothing as the potassium chloride stopped his heart. Her case officer suggested time for decompression before any future assignments. Reassessment would occur in 6 months. Noor left the meeting and walked out into Tel Aviv sunlight. The city felt foreign despite being home. She spoke Hebrew with other pedestrians, but thought her responses in Arabic first, translating mentally before speaking. She ate lunch at a cafe, but found herself craving the cheap street food near Al Amin Hospital. She returned to her apartment, her real apartment, not the empty studio in Beirut, and sat among belongings that felt like they belonged to someone else. Who was she? the Israeli intelligence operative recruited 7 years ago. The Lebanese nurse who had worked night shifts and shared cigarettes with Rania. The woman who smoothed a dying man's blanket while executing him. All of them. None of them. Identity wasn't fixed. It was performed, constructed, reconstructed based on context and necessity. Mossad had taught her that truth through years of training and 9 months of deep cover. You became whoever the mission required you to be. And if you were skilled enough, if you committed completely enough, the performance became indistinguishable from reality. Operation White Coat succeeded because Noor Haddad had been real. Not a disguise worn superficially, but a complete identity inhabited so thoroughly that even she had difficulty remembering where the performance ended and her true self began. That was the cost of deep cover work. Not the danger of exposure or the risk of death, but the erosion of certainty about who you were beneath all the roles you played. Mossad's files recorded Operation White Coat as an unqualified success. Target eliminated. Operative extracted. No exposure. No diplomatic complications. Perfect execution of a complex, high-risk mission. But sitting in her Tel Aviv apartment 3 weeks later, Noor wondered if success was the right word. She had accomplished the mission. She had killed Faisal Darwish. She had returned safely. But she had also spent 9 months living as someone else so completely that she could no longer be certain where Noor Haddad ended and her true self began. She had looked into a dying man's eyes and maintained her performance even as his heart stopped. She had left behind a colleague who thought they were friends, who would never know that every shared confidence had been strategic calculation. These weren't failures. They were the operational requirements of deep cover work. But they were costs measured in psychological currency that no debriefing could fully capture. In classified archives beneath Mossad headquarters, Operation White Coat exists as 73 pages of operational planning, intelligence assessment, and post-mission analysis. The documents describe tradecraft perfection, patience, discipline, flawless execution. What they don't describe is the operative sitting in her apartment months later, still thinking in Arabic, still reaching for an ID badge that no longer exists, still seeing a confused man's face in the moment before his heart stopped. That story doesn't appear in any file. It exists only in the space between who she was, who she pretended to be, and who she became through the act of pretending. Intelligence services don't measure that cost, but operatives pay it nonetheless. 1 syringe, 73 seconds. A life ended invisibly in a place designed for healing. Perfect operational success. Perfect psychological price.